Spider-Man 2. Is it good? Yeah. In Spider-Man 2 you mainly play as Miles Morales or Peter Parker. In free roam you can choose, whereas in the main missions the game will often switch, depending on the mission and the situation. For me, the main missions were not always very good and often felt very scripted. Almost like I was on rails while occasionally being asked to press L2 and R2 to propel myself through tight gaps. Another thing that lets the main missions down is the enemy variety and the lack of boss battles in the first 3/4 of the game. So many times I was thinking, oh yeah, here we go, boss fight, just for him to send his pawns for me to beat up while he runs away. The game does make up for this in the last quarter, and it has a few great boss battles. But even they would sometimes let me down. I'm not going to name any of them, but there's one that takes place in a neighbourhood and in people's gardens. I was doing so well at beating up this boss that I ended up knocking them out of bounds. And I had to wait for them to re-enter the area where we were fighting, and this felt terrible and really took away from what would have been a really good boss battle. I love the side missions you can do in free roam. Side missions are easy to see in the world as they emit a light which can be seen from a distance. This is a great addition as you don't have to keep looking at the map or the minimap. And the side missions always felt so liberating. It felt like I could take them on any way I wanted to. I was never forced to do anything in a certain way. And while some of the side quests might be repetitive, nearly all of them have a nice story that goes along with them, so I always felt compelled to do them all. So much so that I went and got 100% in this game, which I nearly never do in video games these days. Combat when you're playing as one of the Spider-Man feels great. Maybe a little underpowered at the start, but once you get all the upgrades and gadgets, it feels amazing. Something that lets it down is the addition of the parry button. Some enemies require you to parry them before you can hit them. This can become tedious if the only enemy left to fight is one that requires a parry, as you'll just be standing there waiting for them to initiate their attack so that you can parry them and then attack them. But apart from this, the combat feels great. If you didn't like the MJ missions from the first game, I've got bad news. They're back, and the first one is worse than ever, with it really holding your hand. This one I'm showing you right now, I am 16 hours in, and it's just pausing the game and telling me what button to press. But the second time you play as MJ is really fun, and I'll say no more. The story is okay. The thing that lets it down is the story. We've seen it plenty of times from Spider-Man on the big screen and in comic books before, just with some small changes. And it seems in the third game, we're going to be seeing even more stuff that we've seen before. Another thing that lets the story down is the facial animations. To me, they look terrible. 90% of the time they had the emotional range of a smug looking Thunderbirds puppet. But that's not a knock on the voice actors, as they all did an amazing job. Especially as the voice lines for Miles Morales and Peter Parker were delivered differently depending on whether you were walking or swinging. This was very impressive. Another mention on the voice lines is sometimes you can do something in the open world and they'll say, oh, I'll call you back. And then once you finish that event in the open world, they will call them back. This was a really good touch. You can fast travel, but I never used it during my 36-hour playthrough. But I did do it for this review, and it was instant. Very impressive, but when you can swing around and fly around like Spider-Man, why would you bother fast traveling? Like I said earlier, I got 100%, and I can now play the game on a higher difficulty. But I don't plan to do this, as I quite liked it on the default difficulty. As of today, the game still doesn't have New Game Plus mode or mission replay, but the developers did say that this is coming in the future, but I can only review this game as it is today. The soundtrack is very good and can sometimes be epic during the main missions, but it's also very good when you're swinging around in the open world. Unfortunately, I had a lot of bugs in this game, from clipping through stuff in the environment and then getting stuck, to doors not opening, to doors being open but not being able to go through said doors, to enemies that would just stop fighting and just let me beat them up. I saw a lot. A lot of the bugs where I'd get stuck or the doors wouldn't open, I'd have to restart the game. Luckily the game has good checkpoints and it saves frequently and I never lost a lot of progress. That was Spider-Man 2 and I give it a 7 out of 10.